Hi, I'm Isabela Fernandes. I'm the executive director of the Tor Project, the organization behind Tor.
Who invented Tor and why? Is there any story up to it?
There was Paul Silverson with other people. They wrote a paper of the onion routing. And they used to work for the NRL, it's National Research Lab, which is from the US government. The point of the work was like, how can we be anonymous on the internet? So it was a paper, right? Like it was a research paper that they were starting to code and, transform it into actually code and actually a tool that people could use. This code created a network, the Tor network, right? And that process, they realized that the code had to be a free software, had to be decentralized, like nobody could control it. Roger and Nick, they founded the Tor Project nonprofit to start writing this code and release it in the public. And then that's when people downloaded the code and start running the servers that forms our network. The organization was founded in 2006. Eventually in this journey, we created a browser to make it easier for people to access the network. So what we do is allow someone to be anonymous online. It means like your privacy is protected. What you're doing online is not going to be recorded and tracked back to you.
Interesting that it started as a scientific project. Now, how Tor can be used? What are the most popular use cases?
People use Tor for multiple reasons. We respect our users' privacy a lot, right? Like, so we don't record anything about them. And sometimes we ask for those use cases. So people share with us in an anonymous way. But the spectrum of use cases is very broad. So I had like a dad saying, I use Tor because I have teenager kids and I want them to use the internet without the internet recording everything about them, because we all know you search for like shoes and then you have the shoes showing up ads like all over the place following you. So he just wanted to protect the teenagers and so they don't grow old, and then there's like this whole history, right, like following that they didn't want to. At the same time, I have journalists using Tor because it's a very secure way for them to talk with the source. Like I have a case where a doctor who works with high profile clients, I would assume like either politicians or artists, right? Like they use Tor to search for the clients, for the patients' cases, because they don't want people to be matching the time that someone entered the office and what the doctor searched online. That they don't want people to try to guess, right? Like, oh, this person went to the doctor appointment, so therefore they have this problem. So they want to protect the privacy of the clients. Another thing that Tor is really good for is to access information that's been censored. Normally the way to censor is to take the information about the user, right? Like the technology, right? Like knows that it should block that content for that user, right? So with Tor, they don't know that information about you. They cannot understand that you come in, for instance, let's say from Russia or from Brazil. So you can bypass censorship with Tor as well. But at the end of the day, everybody has this common reason, privacy.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned some known cases like for activists, for journalists, just people wanting to preserve their security. But let's imagine I never used Tor before. Mm-hmm. What would my experience be like? In a normal browser, my computer goes to the DNS catalog to get Google's IP address and then connects to the Google server and sends a request to load the page and gets the response from Google through my internet provider. How does this process look in the Tor browser? How different it is under the hood?
So it would be like using any other browser, to be honest. The only difference that it is when you launch the browser, it has a screen with a button that says connect, which is to connect to the Tor network. It's the same process as you are using any other browser. You open the addresses, you type the domain name, you open, you go there, same thing. But in the back, what is happening is that once you connect to the Tor network, our network is actually thousands of volunteers all around the world running a server that is part of that network. And when you connect to the network, your connection goes through 3 of those servers. So when I type google.com, my request goes to the first server. We normally call it guard, like which is guarding the door, like the first one. So you go to the first server. That first server knows that Isabela is in California, for instance, right? So that server get your request, wrap it up in an encryption package, and send to the other server, the middle one. Mm-hmm. The one in the middle have no idea who Isabela is. All they know is that the guard is giving them that package that is encrypted, but they know they need to send to the third server, the exit one. So what they do, they put another layer of encryption and then they send that package to the third one. And then the third one has no idea who the guard was, has no idea that Isabela exists, but knows that someone somewhere wants to open google.com. That third server goes to the DNS serve and then goes to the IP address of Google, and Google sends the page back, and then the page will load. But if Google wants to track that back, they will only see the third server. They will not know the middle one. They will not know the guard one, and much less me, Isabela, that was the one who requested. So that's why when you are using Tor, it's very secure. And those servers also, the communication between them is super secure. So people don't need to be worried like, oh, somebody else is going to be seeing my connection then. Nobody can see, it's protected. So it's super secure.
So considering what we have learned so far, is it true that my internet provider can detect that I am using Tor, but cannot tell what I use it for?
Yes.
And the website can see that they have user accessing it from Tor, but they do not know that it is me because they don't know my address, but the third relay.
Yes, it is. Yeah. When you launch the browser and you connect to the network, that first request, the internet provider sees that, but they don't know what you're doing on the Tor network.
Because all the information is encrypted when I send it to the Tor network.
Exactly.
Okay. So for every request, there are at least 3 middlemen, so to speak, in the Tor network. Could these middlemen see what I'm doing?
Just the first one will see. The guard serve, like the one in the front, will know because I'm telling them, like, I want to open google.com. But that information is encrypted, it's not associated back to me, and it's passed to the other server. When it travels through the Tor network, nobody else knows, and it's encrypted. And by the time it goes out the request, it's impossible to track back.
How many middlemen servers are there in the Tor network?
We have almost 7,000.
Is it mostly like usual people's PCs, or are these some companies' servers?
We have a mix. This type of server, you do need to run in a very good connection. You can run from home. The exit ones, we don't recommend people running from home, but like the middle one, it's all right. But most people, they do a VPS, you can go to a cloud service like AWS. And we also have companies and nonprofits who run servers as well. So they are running like way more than an individual. But normally those organizations, we are in touch with them. We know who they are because we also pay attention to who joins the network, right? Like we don't want malicious people running the network. When someone comes with a lot of servers to the network, we reach out to get to know that person and understand who is behind that.
This is a very interesting point. You mentioned that you are vetting, so to speak, big network contributors. You want to trust them. Why is trust needed? What a malicious attackers could do to the network if he brings enough servers?
That is multiple attacks, so we need to pay attention. So, for instance, it can be trying to de-anonymize, right? Like trying to identify who is using Tor. But imagine if I have a network with 100 servers and one individual is running 90% of that. Like 90 servers is controlled by Isabela alone. So I'm watching who is entering and what is going out. And I can start guessing, right? Like I might not completely know for sure, but I can start guessing, like Samad entered the network at 8:30, and at 8:30, that was this exit relay that requested facebook.com. Could that be Samad? I don't know. But I can do those analysis. Another thing that can happen, I can run exit relays and take advantage of people, because one thing that is important for people to know is that even though you're using the Tor network, it's very important if the website you're accessing has HTTPS or the little lock, because once you're out of the Tor network, like once the last server goes to the internet, that connection we don't control, right? Like that is outside of the Tor network. So that connection is not encrypted.
And if you see this encryption lock, then even if the exit node's owner is malicious, he cannot see what you are asking.
Exactly. because if you're not seeing that lock, if the exit node is malicious, they're going to be watching everything that's going out. If you are, let's say, accessing a website that you need to put your username and your password, and it's not encrypted, people will know your username and password. It's very important that you always look for that little lock. So if your exit node is not requesting an address with the little lock, your exit node is having a communication that is not encrypted with that server.
I want to make a little side note. It's very interesting how only exit nodes are a potential target. And if you are a middleman, even if you want to, you cannot open the envelope and look into it. Is that right?
It is right. Yeah, you cannot. All you know is that I'm receiving something and I need to send something to somebody. Like you have very little power.
That's super interesting. I'm quite sure there is some heavy mathematics involved in this and cryptography, but we do not want to go into this.
No, it's very intense down there.
So let's go back to the owner of the website. Are the owners of the websites okay with Tor users? Because with normal users, an owner of the website knows that it's Isabela from California or Samad from Riga, but now he just knows that it's a Tor user and that's it.
It depends on the website, right? Like, just like you said, some websites, they create security, right? Like protocols, right? Like, which is like, okay, Isabela always access from California. If we see Isabela trying to access from another country, we're going to have to ask like more questions because we want to make sure that it is Isabela. You might have experienced this type of thing when you're traveling, for instance, right? Like when you try to open your email and you are in a different country. So that will be a reaction that you might have to solve a CAPTCHA because of that type of security protocol that they have. Because it's easier for you to be like, okay, I'm taking care of the system, so I just want to make sure it's safe. And people assume that anything coming from Tor, it's unsafe. So they just block all the Tor connections they block. Either they completely block or you need to solve a CAPTCHA. And we have improved that in experience a lot by educating people. For instance, I can give you a very fun example.
Please do.
There is a company called Cloudflare. What they do is they kind of serve as like a front guard for websites for people. So like if you're creating a website, you pay for them, so they take care of your website for security reasons, right? So they used to do that. They used to blacklist all the Tor connections and block it with captures, and people were really mad because they used great part of the internet is behind Cloudflare, you know, like, so I feel like in 2015, from like 7 years ago, there were Tor users protesting outside of this company headquarters.
You're kidding me.
No, I'm serious. Like here in San Francisco. From that, because we start talking with them, they actually has optimized for Tor users. So they understood that like, no, not everything coming from Tor is malicious. What we're doing is a lazy way of protecting our websites. I'm actually impeding people who needs to access this website through this tool for their own security or because it's censored, right? They change it. They change it over time. They understood that the tool is actually very important for a lot of people. And nowadays, like the experience of most people have, like for most of the websites that people access through Tor have improved because of it. I'm going to be honest, this is not just a Tor complaint.
VPNs complaint also. If I try to use a VPN, Facebook will say like, "Are you? Why aren't you from Latvia as usual?
Exactly.
Is this really you?" And I'm like, "Yes, it's me. Stop asking."
Exactly. So it's a very archaic way of establishing security protocol by, matching the person with an IP address. To be honest, one of the solutions for that, which actually Cloudflare, what they have been implementing, which is called privacy pass, which is kind of like, ignore my IP address for a second. You give me a token with an encryption that you will know it's me. So, and this is like, it's seamless for the user. Sometimes I might need to solve one CAPTCHA, but once I solve it and you know it's me, you're not checking my IP address, you're checking that token. So that's the more advanced solution for this problem, because the industry needs to move away from associating people to IP addresses, period. That's like a huge move that needs to happen.
Totally and wholeheartedly agree. Your story about the Cloudflare is very powerful. Can you give some more examples of the popular websites who may be blocking Tor users?
I can give you another story that it has a happy end as well. One of the biggest complaints of Tor users was with Twitter.
Wow.
Because Twitter, people coming from Tor to access Twitter, Twitter would therefore ask you to give you your phone number and all this information, and people don't want to be doing that. We tried for many years to get someone inside to be more open, to change it. And thankfully this year we had people inside that was very friendly to Tor, and they realized the importance. What they did, this is a way that a website can optimize their site for Tor users. It's by creating an onion address. So you have twitter.com, and then you have another address, which is a lot of numbers and letters.
I guess it starts with twee or something.
Yeah, it starts with tweet because you can run the calculations to control the first letters, but the rest you cannot control because it's generated, right, like by the math calculations for encryption. It creates this long string of numbers and letters, and at the end there is a .onion. This domain .onion, it's a Tor domain only. Nobody else in the world can buy, like, I don't know, like Isabela.onion. So when you have that address for your website, the user access Twitter inside of the Tor network. There is no exit relay happening here. Instead of me going to 3 servers and then going to the normal internet to access twitter.com, I actually go to the third one. It's a meeting point where Twitter is meeting me inside of the network. So I'm not going outside of the network. So that makes everything much more secure, faster. So when Twitter launched that address, all the Tor users went from having a hard time connecting to Twitter to actually Twitter seeing that as a normal connection, not freaking out about it. Question was, how many others are like that? Like I said, we've been working on this for so long. So luckily we have been able to get most of Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, all of them are using Tor now. A lot of major global news websites like New York Times, Guardian, BBC, they're using Tor as well. But they're still relative important websites, right? Like maybe more regional. And that's where another very important component of Tor, which is the community, comes in play. We cannot be everywhere around the world, but our community in the region, they do that. I can tell you another story. In Mexico, the internet provider was blocking Tor. People could not access Tor. People from our community in Mexico reached out to the internet provider, managed to get meetings with them, educate them, and then unblock Tor. So that was a huge win.
Wow, that is a story.
Yeah, and that's what is important to build community, right? Like to continue that education on the regional levels.
Thank you very much. I started understanding that websites can penalize people using Tor, but now I want to get back to the people who can really penalize you for using Tor. So can I be charged prosecuting for using Tor? Are there any examples like that?
It depends from country to country, of course. There is no law that I am aware of in any country that says you cannot use this tool. However, there are other laws in countries, right? Like there are laws, for instance, there are countries where they have a social media tax. So if you're using Tor, you don't need to pay to use social media.
Which country is that, Isabela?
It's Uganda. So that could be you might be penalized because of something else.
So you're circumventing the tax collection inside the country.
Not a lot of people would have the money to pay that tax to be able to have freedom of expression or access information. It is a form of control, right? So there are countries where censorship is very heavy. So if you are using Tor, let's say I get arrested in a protest and they might look at my phone and see tools that they know is for bypassing censorship. That might increase the problems I am on. So I feel like there is no clear prohibition, but it depends on the situation of country by country and the situation of human rights abuse, authoritarian regimes, right? It's not just about downloading a tool, not just about the technology. So we call it this threat modeling, right? Is when you analyze the threat and you analyze how much of a risk you want to take, and then you do the calculation.
Isabela, I want to circle back on one specific case which most of my audience might have heard about, and I think I've seen you give an interview about it too. The case of Dmitry Bogatov. It's a Russian mathematician. This guy was charged for being a Tor node administrator. Could you please give some background on this story and how it ended and why?
Yes. Remember when I said we have 6,000 to 7,000 servers? He was volunteer. He was running some of those servers. However, we explained it already, right? The person running the server has no information and no control of what is happening there. So he was unfairly arrested as if he was responsible for everything that was happening in the server, right?
Was he running an exit node? So his server was sending the final message to the public website. From what I remember, there was a bomb threat on some public institution's website, and his IP address was the IP address of the...
Remember when I was saying like, some of the servers we do not recommend you run from home? That is one of them, right? Like, and the reason why the IP address of the server will be the IP address of thousands of people requests on the internet that you have no idea what they're requesting and what they're doing. So from those thousands of requests might come forum posts, right? Like a blog post that says, I'm going to bomb this building. Authorities are like, oh my God, who actually wrote this? And then the first thing they do is, what is the IP address this comes from? And then they will go to who is responsible for the IP address. And then they will look at your name. So you're going to be the first one to get the blame for it. Why we don't have thousands of people at Tor being arrested like Dimitri? Because number one, when people are doing, especially exit relays, we recommend them to let the server provider, like the data center, know that you're doing that. So they will not be as freaking out as much, like they will understand. Second, we at Tor, we have created a template letter that the relay operators can give to law enforcement that says like, yes, this server belongs to me, but it is a Tor server. Here's the information that proves it is a Tor server. And I therefore have no control who did it. 90% of the time, that is enough. They will know that you are not the one to blame for that post. In the case of Dimitri, that was not enough. And they tried to prosecute him for the content, right? Like, so luckily the lawyers won, right? Like, and prove it that he was not the person who published. He was not controlling, had no control over who was publishing, has no way to track the information back. Because one of the things that they were asking is like, we want more data. We want to be able to identify this person. Genuinely, he could not give more data because there was no more data. So eventually things got cleared out for him and he was released. But I think like this is a combination of things that is a bigger motivation behind here than just trying to solve that particular case. So I think because of the context of within that country, escalated, because we have people all around the world who go through something similar, and the letter I'm talking about is enough.
Isabela, is it safer for me to connect to Tor via VPN to hide the fact that I am using Tor from the service provider or the government?
I would ask, what VPN are you using?
Do I trust the VPN provider?
Exactly. Okay, now I have my internet provider knowing that I'm using this VPN, and now I have the VPN knowing I'm using Tor. Like, is it really helping to do that?
And if you trust VPN you're using?
If you definitely feel that would put you a lot at risk if your internet provider knows that you're using Tor, but less of a risk that they know you're using VPN, because I would say, right, like some places, Tor and VPN are treated equally.
Mm-hmm. Like China, I think.
Exactly. So it really depends on your contacts, I would say. For instance, here in California or even in Brazil, I would not recommend, because one, the threat of knowing that you're connecting to Tor is very low. Two, will only give more information to a third party. And three, it will make even slower the connection for you, because now you're adding one more server to that three servers.
That was my question. Tor sends my traffic through 3 random servers. I gather speed or latency could be severely affected. Is Tor browser much slower than usual browser?
It will be slower than the usual browser because of the internet connection. We are improving it. This year, we actually launched something called congestion control. The name sounds like controlling the congestion inside of the network. So that new design will make a huge impact on people experience, especially most of our servers are in the global north. So if you're connecting from some place like Brazil, the latency is even worse because you need to travel to a server far away. So this will help a lot on that. Users right now are not seeing the effect of it because unfortunately, as the time we launched the new feature to make the network faster, somebody started attacking the network to make it slow. So,
wow.
So it was like, okay, thank you. But now we are fighting that, right? And when I say somebody's don't worry, it's not that if somebody's attacking you directly, but the way this works is people injecting a lot of requests. So the servers on the network need to respond to a lot of requests. The congestion control cannot deal with a lot of that. If if it's coming with a high frequency, right? Like as an attack.
Isabella, who would like to attack Tor? What would be the motivation?
That's a great question. We don't know who is doing this, but I would assume there's a lot of different motivations to attack Tor. One could be a state motivation, right? Like some government motivated to slow down the connection. The reasons is impossible to narrow down and to know who did it and why. There is so many reasons out there that are like, it's not surprising that it's happening, and as part of our job is to always assume that can happen and prepare ourselves to defend from when it happens, right?
If I'm a normal person and I want to circumvent censorship, whatever, should I use Tor or should I use VPN?
I recommend Tor because one of the pros versus VPN is decentralized, right? Like it's not like Isabela's network that you're using. And on the VPN, the owner of the VPN, the company knows who's connecting. And depending on the case of the VPN, you really need to just trust the company because the code is proprietary, so you don't even can out it. There's a lot of free VPNs out there that like any other free service is not really free. It's collecting your data and selling it. So definitely one of the biggest plus that we have is because it was designed to be like that. It's designed to nobody have control, to be decentralized, has the layers of encryption.
So you do not trust a person or a group of people. You trust the mathematics and the design of the thing.
Yes.
It sounds very much like cryptocurrency.
Yeah, but it's very transparent. People can audit it. There are papers being published about our security. So I think transparency and have that level of like third parties validations that sometimes you don't get when you randomly pick whatever free VPN that shows up on your app store,
So I want to segue into the different segment. So we talked about how Tor could be used instead of a regular browser. Are there other ways to use Tor apart from accessing the websites blocked by my government or my internet provider?
Yes. Remember those onion addresses that I was talking about?
Yeah.
You have a lot of different applications using that in different ways. One that is super cool is called Onion Share, right? Like you need to share a file with somebody. I need to send you PDF or something. I will put it on like a Google Drive or Dropbox. What you're doing, you literally put in your digital file into somebody else's computer and then trusting that that person will not touch it, will not see it, will not copy it. With Onion Share, that is nobody's computer. It's my computer and your computer. That's it. So when I'm sharing a file with you, the application will create an Onion address because it's an Onion address will only work inside of the Tor network. It's encrypted end to end. The metadata might not even exist. And you who receive the address, we put it on the browser and you click on the download button and you download the file. And on my side, on the application, I see that somebody downloaded. I can stop sharing, like I can just stop. And that's it. It went from my computer straight to your computer, no somebody else's server. And this is actually an incredible, powerful tool. For instance, this tool was created when journalists had to receive files from Edward Snowden.
Wow. Oh my God.
Also, we at Tor, we do trainings with human rights defenders all around the world. Like we were in Colombia training a group of campesinos, people from the countryside. And like Colombia has a lot of conflicts in the countryside with paramilitary organizations, a lot of assassinations and killings. And actually, this was a group of women. And the reason was a group of women because all the men has already been killed from the village, so that's why they were like learning how to use Tor because they need to send the documentation of those crimes to the lawyers without nobody knowing that they were the one who gave that information to the lawyers.
Oh my gosh.
So Onion Share was the perfect tool for them to do that, And sometimes Onion Share also allows you to do other things, allows you to have a chat instead of having an Isabela account where I log in with my username and password to chat with you. I am an Onion address and you are an Onion address. And once you've done the conversation, you can just erase the chat and that is like nothing. One time I was training lawyers and they were like, actually, I should put this on my resume because I feel like this is a skill set that every lawyer should have. Like they're dealing with so much sensitive information, right? I think it's an incredible tool that we are working a lot to educate people for more adoptions and for people to know that these applications exist, so they can use it.
I hope definitely definitely we are educating them right now, and some people will start using Onion Share. We talked at length about the ways Tor network protects privacy and security of the user. If I run Onion website, what kind of protection I get as a website owner? Is there any difference? Because right now, if I run a normal website, I put my IP address, I put my DNS name, and it could be easily tracked back to me. How about Tor network?
There's actually two ways, right? Like there's a way, which is the Twitter example, right? Like where there is the twitter.com and the Onion address. Those are associated to each other. And that is another way where there's only the Onion address. They will protect where the website is hosted, because the IP address, like you said, is not public. So nobody can track back to where is the original IP address of their website. There is no need for you to register the domain nowhere. So you're not like paying for a domain name or anything like that. Those two things alone allows your security to be anonymous as you create that website. And I can give you a case for that. Abortion. Abortion is illegal in Brazil. If I do an abortion, I can get up to 5 years in jail. If I am a reproductive rights organization and I create a website where I teach women how to do it safely at home, I can be arrested because I'm helping people to commit a crime. In that case, I want to have that information out there in the world, but make it impossible that can be traced back to me. And sometimes there are other reasons, for instance, when people want to leak information, corruption cases information, they can create a website. Those two properties protects the owner of the website. So we say that like with Tor, the same way you can anonymously access information, you can also anonymously share information, you know?
That's very interesting, because I think most of the people do not think about the fact that it's almost impossible to host a website anonymously on the internet, and Tor makes that possible.
Exactly. So the point is, it's important to have an alternative, to have a technology that said you can still do it and this is how you do it.
Isabella, I wholeheartedly agree that I want to help activists and journalists and make their work possible and safe. But they are not the only demographic using Tor. Are there any users, website hosters that you as a company, you as an organization don't really like and don't want to host?
Unfortunately, the answer to that is yes. Our mission is to advance human rights with our technology. That's why all my examples are related to human rights, because that is the goal of building this technology. But unfortunately, we don't control it. Other people might be able to do the same thing for criminal activity. But I would say that because of everything else that I said before, right? Like because of the structure of how Tor is by default, is by design. There is nobody controlling it. I cannot change that structure to start controlling it, to start impeding those who are using the technology to commit crimes. Because once I do that, I create a huge leverage for people to come to me and control the human rights defenders too, and be like, oh, I heard that you managed to find that person for this law enforcement. Now I want you to find this one too. And then like how you play that game, how you say, oh, I'm going to do just for this one, but not for that one. So it's much better for everybody that we don't change the technology to control it. I have seen articles written by the police itself talking about cyber security and like Tor and like the dark web. And at the end, they wrote that they said like the best way is the old school police work, which it is infiltrate, watch, right? Like we don't need to break the encryption. We don't need to create a backdoor or anything for that. So if we go down that road, then we will be persecuting and criminalizing so many other people that has nothing to do. Like a car can be used for somebody to escape a crime scene. And then we have all the mechanisms to investigate who used that car, we're not impeding people from using cars. People who have used Tor to commit crime has been arrested, not because Tor technology was modified for people to find them, but because of all the type of police work that identified them and arrested them.
It's a very good example with a car, because I think most government heads will say to you, yes, that's why we have license plates on the cars, and why don't you have that on a Tor? I'm pro-security on the internet, but I think it's a very powerful example that we can have technology, but built in some way place so that we can track and suppress things we don't like as a society. Do you think there is a place in Tor for adding some more tools for the government to prosecute the criminals?
No. I mean, like, sorry. But I feel like it's not my job to create tools for the government to prosecute criminals. The government needs to do the work. The police needs to do the work. I'm saying no to the way that have been proposed in the past, which is the way where give me a backdoor, give me a way to monitor their users. And like, no, that way, no. But we are being open. Unfortunately, there is no solution being proposed to us. I don't want people to think that like, oh, she doesn't even care. She doesn't even want to listen. I am 100% open, but I have a bar of security, a bar related to the code, and all those components of trust and transparency that I spoke before. I'm not lowering that bar to solve that problem.
Cool.
That's my point.
Mm-hmm. That's what I want to hear from someone who is developing tools I'm using. How do authorities in different countries feel about Tor? For instance, law enforcement officials, legislators. Do you see any difference in different parts of the world?
Yes. I would say here in the United States, it's kind of like a love and hate relationship. It really depends on who you're talking with inside of the government. It can be very little about political orientation, and it's more about just understanding the technology. And then you have people who sees encryption as a danger. The only people who benefit from this is criminal terrorist organizations, and they are like on this side because of lack of education on the technology as well. Actually, funny thing, right? Is that law enforcement and military, they use Tor a lot because they don't want nobody to know who they're like looking at on the line.
Are you serious? Is it like one of the tools which is used?
Yes, of course. As they're doing investigation, they need to be anonymous online as well, so they appreciate that to exist. So I feel like it is extremely important. We are part of the Global Encryption Coalition. We manage to write letters to the legislators. We educate them. We try to meet with them. That coalition has been an incredible tool for us to be aware of what type of laws are happening out there in the world, react to that, right? So our voices are stronger to protect encryption.
Do law enforcement officers ask you to help with investigating criminal offenses? Do they come to you?
Sometimes we do get letters. They actually listen, there was a threat of a bomb somewhere and we are investigating and we saw it came from a Tor IP address. Can you help us out? And then we send that same letter, this is how Tor works. Unfortunately, it's impossible for us to help you. What is the IP address of this? I would love to help you, but I don't have. If you don't have, what can you do? For my years at Tor, at least, I have never encountered a situation where we were forced to do something or people were really threatening us, you're going to go to jail if you don't collaborate or anything like that. No.
That's good to hear. This summer, the Russian government blocked Tor website. Can Tor be fully banned in Russia or any other country?
It can, actually. It can. But let me just explain how people can block Tor, right? Easy one. People can block our website. How you download Tor if you cannot access the website. Another thing, those 7,000 servers that I told you, they're public. They're not secret. Anyone, because the clients need to download that. So anyone can actually pretend to be a client and download that list and block all those IP addresses. And then people cannot join the network because they're censored, right? And they can block the IP address. They can block in more sophisticated ways as well. This is possible, right? To block Tor. So what we do in moments like this, for instance, with the website, we have mirrors. We have all the domains names that people can still access a copy of our website. If you wanted to download the browser, we have a way for you to email us and you're going to receive the browser to install or send it in Telegram.
I understand that there are ways to download the software, but you said that these 7,000 IP addresses of servers are open. And we have an organization in Russia called Roskomnadzor. I don't know if you heard this name. They are capable of blocking access to specific IP address on the internet for Russian users. What happens next?
If you manage to download Tor, you cannot connect to the network because they are blocking those IP addresses. We have a set of servers that are not public. It's around 2,000. So we have 7,000 that are public and we have another 2,000. We call it then bridges. How do we know which service what? When you are a volunteer and you're running a server, on the configuration you say, my server is a bridge, my server is an exit, right? You determine that. And the user needs to request to receive the address of that breach. When you open the browser and you're sitting there and waiting and does not connect, it has a high chance that the problem is because Tor is blocked. There is a helper that will try to pick the best breach for you without you having to think too much, so we can figure out what is the censorship you have and what breach you need to use. But it is possible to access Tor, even though when it's all blocked because of those breaches. You can select one of those secret addresses and go and bypass the censorship using it. Now, should I explain what happened with the Russian case?
Yes, please do.
All right. So in early December, we started to see users asking, like, Tor is not working in Russia, and then we started investigating it. The first thing that we noticed was our website being blocked. And then we went to the hosting provider, and they gave us I cannot pronounce the name of the agency.
Roskomnadzor,
RKM, better, easier. RKM letter to them saying that the website was being put in a list and was being blocked. That was based on a case from 2017 that was happening in the court, that they never reached out to us. We had no idea that was going on. Later, we started investigating because the letter was for the domain, but we identified that they were also blocking the network, not just the domain address. We started doing that in December. And then we also have an organization in Russia who is providing us with legal support.
Which is called Roskomsvoboda.
Yeah, Roskomsvoboda. Thank you for pronouncing it, right? Because I was trying to pronounce it, how do I pronounce it? So they enter with first an appeal asking the court to dismiss the case because we were not involved to defend ourselves. We won that appeal. Officially, Tor is not blocked until we have a trial and maybe they block it again. But a fun fact is that at the same time that we won the appeal, in another path, the RKM requested Google to remove Tor Browser from the Google Play Store. So now Google is in the game as well, and Google legal team is there. And that's where we are. We at Tor have built a mechanism to bypass censorship. So people in Russia could still be able to access the internet with Tor. Somebody can be like, so why you care to fight, right? It's important to fight, right? It's also important to fight for the Russian people, because once you don't fight, those things just become normal. They just start to happen more often. It can create precedents, but also we hope that we can help, right? Bring in more democracy, right? Democratic processes and stuff like that.
I'm close to starting crying because of talking about the judicial system in Russia, so I just move on to more safe technical questions. Who develops Tor?
Oh man, we have an organization with 42 people. It's a small organization, and again, goes back to community, right? The reason we are capable of doing so much is because of that. Alone, we would not be able.
Of these 40 people, how many are programmers actually?
I think 80% of that. Yeah, 80 or 85%.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a high number.
Yeah, we have many teams. An anti-censorship team. We have network health team that keep track of the bad relays and stuff like that. We have the network team. We have the applications that build the browser. We are building a VPN for Android. So soon, in a couple of years, we're going to have one of that. We have a lot of teams, right, doing the technical side.
Mm-hmm. Is the most of the development done by these internal teams, or is it open source in the sense that people from all over the world are contributing to the code?
It's both. We are doing most of the development, but we do receive a lot of contribution from people around the world. But fortunately, because of not only we have the qualities of being open source and transparent that allows them to research us, we are a solution that is deployed for millions of people. A lot of the times you have a solution that would do the same thing, but it's not used by millions of people, so the research community has an attraction to research Tor because of those components. Sometimes the design that will solve a huge problem that is very complex does not come from us. It comes from the research community. And they publish a paper that explains this is how you could congestion control, for instance. This is how you could speed up the network, and then we take that paper and then we start implementing and so forth. But the amount of time to come up with that solution, that did not come from the 42 people at all,
It's super cool to be in a position when people from the outside, from academia, are actually improving your project and working on your project. But still, 40 people is a big team. How is Tor financed? Where is the money coming from?
Donations and grant proposal, right? Like we are a non-profit. We receive grants. We have grants from the government, from a U.S. government, Sweden government. We got from the German government at some point. We have grants from private foundation, donations from companies and organizations, and we have donations from individuals. But as a non-profit that builds software, we do really want to increase the pool of money that is not necessarily a grant proposal that we wrote. For people who works in the industry, they will feel my pain. Imagine you have a great idea and you need to put that on a paper, wait 6 to 12 months for them to be approved so you can actually write the code to do it. You know, you don't want to live like that. So for instance, now we have this DDoS, this attack to slow down the network, right? My engineers are shifting priorities. So we need to have that. We need to have this leverage to not be full-time doing a grant proposal for whatever.
What share, could you give me a rough estimate of like how much of the money is from the people, what percentage from the governments and from the grant proposals? And maybe that will motivate some people to donate to Tor.
Oh, yes. We just published, right? Every year we publish our financial report and we publish for the fiscal year of the previous year, right? Like in that one, we say that 38% came from U.S. government, 36% came from individual donations. So that in numbers translates to $2.8 million coming from the U.S. government and 2.6 is coming from individual donations.
Oh my God, that's nothing. So the link for donations will be in the description of this episode, but I'm still floored by the fact that it's like less than I think 10 of millions of dollars to run the whole Tor project. And that is like crazy by the impact you are doing. So, okay, is there any room for improvement? What's next for the Tor? What are your employees currently working on?
There's a lot of things that we can still do to improve on Tor. One of the big projects that we're having right now, we are rewriting Tor in Rust, which is a more modern, secure language. It was written in C. So we are on the second year of development. By the end of this year, we will have enough of like a Tor in Rust that people will be able to test it. We are building a VPN for Android. On mobile, we're working with Libo and Arbot, which are two other open source VPNs. We believe in collaboration. And we also believe that the more tools are out there doing this, the better. And those are the two main things happening. If you want to know more, let me do a little bit of advertising. Every year we have the State of the Onion. And the State of the Onion is a streamed virtual event where every team of the Tor gives a 5 minutes update about what they did and what they're going to do for the next year.
Wow.
But it's recorded, so it's going to be on YouTube. You can watch later.
That's great. Actually great. We will definitely put the links to the YouTube recordings into the description of this episode. So my last question is, I'm quite sure there will be some of my listeners who might be interested in supporting Tor. What can they do and how could they help?
There's a lot. So one, of course you can donate. Two, you can help with translations. We need help with translations. You can help that way.
Even in Russian?
Yes, we created a whole support in Russian just because of, right, like the censorship that started with Russia and then the war. We have a channel on Telegram that gives user support that is all in Russian only, so more than welcome to jump in and help. Another thing that is, so if you're not technical to be able to run a bridge or a server part of the network, you can still contribute with bandwidth for sensory users. You can download a web extension for Chrome or Firefox. It's called Snowflake. And the Snowflake, what that does is that you're donating bits of your bandwidth to the Snowflake bridge that users will be using to bypass censorship. On the web extension, it gives a really cool feedback to you. So it will tell you, like, in the last 24 hours, you helped 20 people bypass the internet, the censorship,
Wow.
so you're like, oh, I'm actually helping people, right? Like the cases of censorship against Tor started this year. It went from like a few thousands to over 100,000 of people running those web extensions and collaborating with bandwidth.
Link to this extension will be in the description of this episode.
Another one, educate people, right? Like I feel like educate people, let them know that Tor exists, let them know what it is about, because going to the point that like you never know when you're going to need it. So when people knows it exists and there is an internet shutdown, there's a censorship or something like that, they are capable of connecting online. So also educating people, it's a great way to help Tor.
Great. I hope we are doing exactly that, educating people. Thank you so much, Isabela.
Bye-bye.